Flashback. More info at fullandbloom.com. In today's Full and Bloom Flashback, we revisit an old school print interview I did with vocalist Nigel Benjamin. The interview was conducted in 2009 and covered his days in Mott and London. In this interview excerpt, Nigel talked about what it was like running the band London, which featured Nikki Sixx on bass, on joining London, and what the LA scene was like at that time. I had just moved to LA, and an ad was put in the paper looking for a singer that was influenced by me. I thought, that's odd, so I called and went to a gig that night. I hung out mostly at the Starwood. Elmer had closed the whiskey for a while, I seem to remember. I wouldn't call it a scene. The rainbow was changing in the wrong direction for me. I eventually stopped going there, but I'm still friends with the owners. I had a free tab at the Starwood up until it closed. Didn't pay for a drink for years. On a typical day in the life of Nigel Benjamin during that time: getting up, going for a swim, rehearsals in Hollywood in a tiny little office, the consumption of huge amounts of gin, magically getting home most nights about 2 a.m. by the grace of God. Repeat. On his memories of Nikki Sixx. Nikki wanted so desperately to be a star, and now he is. He liked to throw drinks in people's faces if they heckled him, glass included. I prefer a more subtle approach. I never saw him drunk or take drugs. I last saw Nikki at Heather Locklear's wedding to Tommy Lee. Previous to that, at the Whiskey, where I explained once and for all I did not want to join Motley Crue or give Vince Neil singing lessons. On not joining Motley Crue, I didn't wish to go down that road any further. I had already done a lot of glam stuff years earlier when it was new. I didn't want to do metal, and you have to trust the people you form a band with. I didn't trust Nikki, but I became good friends with Tommy. I opened the door when he came for Heather on their first date. I was living there at the time, as I dated her sister for about 4 years back then. It was like Nikki would never leave my life. Look, maybe he's a good guy now. I didn't hate him back then, really, but he and Lizzie Grey did a lot of backstabbing when I had the nerve to leave. They couldn't hang, so they blamed me. My marriage was ending, and I had a lot to deal with. I did give Lizzie a second chance with another version of London. I don't want to prattle on too much here, but suffice to say, it was a fiasco. Absolute nightmare. The most unprofessional attempt in the history of ever. I couldn't get into a gig one night at the Troubadour as I wasn't on the list. That was the same night our old keyboard player showed up for his gear that the new guy was using because Lizzie had not told him he was out. Sorry, the question was about Motley, but it's all connected back then. On what he remembers most about his last gig with London and why he left the band. Lizzie and Nikki trying to shove me off the front of the stage at the end of that show, but me and my security had anticipated them doing something stupid, so it failed. We were done. It was going nowhere. We could not progress or improve. It was all it was ever going to be. I had taken it as far as I could. We couldn't make the leap. I was frustrated with Nikki's bass playing and was getting ready to move on. In closing, Nigel said, "I've been lied to and about for so long that I'm really pissed off. I am no saint, and I've created my own mayhem, sure enough, and I was, and probably still am, a bit of a poser. Of course, priests don't play rock and roll, but I've never crapped on a friend, or backstabbed, or lied, or stolen, or pretended to be anything. I still have a lyric sheet to a song called Girls, Girls, Girls that I wrote in 1979, the year before I met Nikki Sixx. It was always about the music, the art, the soul of the matter, never the money or fame. London meant something, though not that much, for one long summer all those years ago." You can read the entire interview at fullandbloom.com. Click the link in the description.